the first story of your second book, that is Supplementary Reader, Footprints Without Feet. This chapter is written by Dr. James Herriot. A triumph means victory. Tricky, a small dog, is pampered and overfed by his rich mistress. He falls seriously ill and his mistress consults a veterinary surgeon. Does he perform an operation? Does the dog recover? These are the two questions which we are going to explore and find out in the story. Few more questions. Why is Mrs. Pumphrey is the mistress of the dog Tricky, worried about Tricky? What does she do to help him? Is she wise in this? Who does I refer to in the story? We know that Dr. James Herriot is also the narrator of the story. He is a veterinary surgeon and writer and narrator of the story. I was really worried about Tricky this time. I had pulled up my car when I saw him in the street with his mistress, and I was shocked at his appearance. When Doctor was moving in his car, he saw the dog and he was abnormally hefty, heavy and hugely fat. He had become hugely fat, like bloated sausage. Bloated means swollen, big size. Sausages are the preserved meat in the overfilled tube. In this story they mean that, with a leg at each corner. His eyes bloodshot red and rheumy is the eyes, watery are the eyes. Stared straight ahead and his tongue lolled from his jaw. Mrs. Pumphrey hastened to explain. He was so listless, Mr. Herriot, and he seemed to have no energy. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition. So I have been giving him some little extra between meals to build him up. Some malts, cod liver oil and a bowl of Horlicks at night to make him sleep. Nothing much really. So this lady is saying that this dog was listless, lifeless, lack of energy and looked malnourished. So extra dose of food was given to him. This was out of love, their great bond they shared. She loved the dog very much. And did you cut down on the sweet things as I told you? Oh, I did for a bit, but he seemed to be so weak I had to relent. He does love cream, cakes and chocolates, so I can't bear to refuse him. Now she is very, very straightforward that I cannot refuse dog. He loves the chocolates, cakes and cream so much. She pushed her back, relent. I looked down again at the little dog. That was the trouble. Tricky's only fault was greed. He had never been known to refuse food. He cannot refuse food. His only trouble was that he loved food so much, and it became a habit for him to have whatever comes for him. He would tackle a meal at any hour of the day or night. And I wonder about all the things Mrs. Pumphrey hadn't mentioned. Are you giving him plenty of exercise? Well, he has little walks with me, as you see, but Hodgkin is the gardener, has been down with lumbago, so there has been no ring throwing lately. From last few days, he is not playing with the ring. I tried to sound severe. This is what Herriot says. I want to be harsh with her. Now I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right down, give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet. Mrs. Pumphrey wrung her hand. Oh, I will. Mr. Harriet, I'm sure you are right, but it is so difficult, so very difficult. She set off, head down along the road as if she determined to put a new regime into practice immediately. New regime is new routine, new system. I watched their progress with growing concern. Tricky was trotting. He was walking very weakly along in his little tweed coat. He had several coats. No, he had a whole wardrobe of these coats for the cold weather, a raincoat for the wet days. He struggled on drooping in his harness. Harness is the leash with which you hold it. And I thought it wouldn't be long before I heard from Mrs. Pumphrey. The expected call came within few days. Mrs. Pumphrey was distraught, extremely worried. Tricky would not eat. Tricky would eat nothing, refused even his favorite dishes. Besides, he had bouts of vomiting. He spent all his time lying on the rug, panting, breathing heavily, didn't want to go for walks, didn't want to do anything. I had made my plans in advance. The only way was to get Tricky out of the house for a period. I suggested that he be hospitalized for about a fortnight to kept under observation. The poor lady almost swooned, became unconscious, anxious. She was sure that she would pine and die. He would pine and die if he didn't see her every day. Now this was that sort of attachment they both had. But I took a firm line. Tricky was very ill, and this was the only way to save him. In fact, I thought it best to take him without delay, and followed by Mrs. Pumphrey's wailings, I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in blanket. The entire staff rose in the family of Mrs. Pumphrey. Maid rushed in and out, bringing his day bed, his night bed, favorite cushions, toys, rubber rings, breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl. Realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff, I started to drive away. As I moved off, Mrs. Pumphrey, with a despairing cry, threw all the armful of the little coats through the window. I looked into the mirror before I turned the corner of the drive, and everybody was in tears. Everybody was in tears. Out on the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal gasping. He was unable to breathe. On the seat of my side, I patted, with love, out of a stroke or out of love, and the head, and Tricky made a brave effort to wag his tail, shake his tail. Poor old lad, I said, you haven't a kick in you, but I think I know a cure for you. He said he was so determined, he was so confident that this dog will soon be cured, soon be fine, fit and fine as usual. Now next part of it we'll deal in the next video. I hope you understood the first half of the chapter.